Yes, I'm Boris Prou, president of the Press Gallery. And we got today the Honorable Michelle Rempel Garner, Conservative Shadow Minister for Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship. For this press conference, we'll start with a few remarks on the podium and then the question period. If you're attending in person, please be mindful about the little earpiece, not to put it too close to the microphone because this can create hurtful audio feedback for our interpreters. We'll go after a few remarks to the question period on the basis of one question, one follow-up. Sur ce, Madame la députée, c'est à vous.
Merci. Good morning, everyone. In recent months, there have been more cases of non-citizens who have been convicted of serious crimes in Canada receiving lenient sentences in order to avoid deportation. Here are but a few. A 34-year-old Ghanaian temporary resident was convicted of theft after a violent confrontation. He was granted a conditional discharge, with the judge explicitly citing his non-citizen status and the risk of deportation as a reason for the lenient outcome. A 33-year-old Nigerian man was convicted of breaching a no-contact order with his former partner. On appeal, the judge substituted a conditional discharge, citing the risk of deportation as a key reason. A temporary resident from India pled guilty just this June to sexually assaulting a woman in Prince George, BC. He only received 170 days of house arrest plus probation. The judge declined to put him on the National Sex Offender Registry, citing potential immigration consequences that could lead to his deportation. These types of rulings now happen so frequently that a judge in Montreal accused Montreal prosecutors of proposing candy sentences for criminals at risk of deportation, affirming that this is a common practice across the country. It's also worth noting that with regard to the FAM decision, the court explicitly ruled that consideration of immigration status does not constitute a charter right, a remedy, or a charter breach. In fact, the ruling did not mention the charter at all. Furthermore, it made it clear that the flexibility of Canada's sentencing process must not be misused by imposing inappropriate or artificial sentences, which arguably is what's happening all the time now. Doing so would circumvent Parliament's will, as reflected in longstanding immigration law, which requires that a non-citizen convicted of serious crime in Canada must be deported. That law is there for a reason. Giving non-citizens who have been convicted of serious crimes in Canada lenient sentences to avoid deportation creates a two-tier justice system where Canadian citizens are given harsher sentences than non-citizens who broke our laws. Not only is this hostile to the common good, but it sends a clear message to non-citizens, and that message is this: it's okay to break Canada's laws with impunity because non-citizens can stay in our country, cities, and communities even if they commit serious crimes like sexual assaults. That stark, anti-Canadian reality was showcased in an explosive global news story last week regarding a classified intelligence report by the CBSA. The report showed that India's Bishnoi gang has expanded its criminal network into Canada, allegedly instigating high-profile murders, political assassination, and deepening the current extortion crisis. The report indicated that crimes committed by Indian nationals in Canada on temporary student permits skyrocketed by a whopping 8,800% from 2016 to 2024, while that country was ranked as the top source of foreign students charged with crimes. Between 2019 and 2023, 4,000 of those international students were charged with nearly 18,000 criminal offenses. A third of those offenses were considered serious or organized crime-related, while 97% of those crimes were considered violent. In 2024 alone, more than 13,000 criminal charges were laid against international students from India. I'd like to repeat that all to let that sink in. 4,000 temporary residents were charged with nearly 18,000 criminal offenses in a recent 4-year period. A third of those crimes were considered serious or organized crime-related, and almost all of those were violent crime. While at the same time, judges across Canada are still giving non-citizens convicted of these serious crimes lenient sentences in order to allow them to avoid deportation consequences that have long been set out in Canada's immigration law. That is insane, and it's disgusting, and it should be considered one of Canada's greatest political scandals and tragedies. That's because practices that let certain people commit crimes with impunity are corrosive to a high-trust society. It makes Canada unsafe, leading to a society that is less trusting to everyone, including immigrants who have come to Canada and work hard and play by the rules. And it makes our country even more fragmented. But yet, in a recent press conference, Prime Minister Mark Carney claimed that he had, quote, taken back control of immigration. Come on. We have 4,000 foreign students committing 18,000 crime who are likely to get sweetheart deals to avoid deportation. That is not an immigration system that is under control. Discussions about Canada's immigration system can't just be about numbers, which, with millions of non-citizens in Canada with expired or expiring visas, are still too high. We must also ensure that our immigration system preserves a high-trust society that respects our laws and that new immigrants are able to integrate into. That necessitates one law for all. In the past year, Conservatives have proposed amendments to legislation and other policies that would do the following: end the practice of non-citizens' immigration status being considered in criminal sentencing. This was a bill I put forward last year, which the Liberals voted against. Restoring real and full security and criminal vetting of foreign students and workers, amending the definition of serious criminality in the Immigration Refugee Protection Act to ensure serious crimes face serious consequences, ensuring ministers issue detention orders and law enforcement issues warrants when someone poses a risk to public safety, penalizing lies and fraud in immigration application, firm deadlines for judicial review processes, and transparent reporting requirements on warrants and deportations that Canadians can review. But all of these measures have been blocked by Sean Fraser, the Minister of Justice, and Lena Diab, the Minister of Immigration, and Canadians are living with the consequences of entirely preventable crime and disorder in our streets. Fixing these problems is not a difficult proposition. Change the criminal code. It only takes one line to stop the practice of non-citizens convicted of serious crimes from getting lenient sentences in order to avoid deportation. Implement better screening processes for immigrants, as the Auditor General herself recommended earlier this year, and change other laws to ensure that if a non-citizen is convicted of a serious crime, they are punished and then deported. It's worth noting that Sean Fraser, as Justice Minister, is blocking some of these changes after being the Immigration Minister who issued nearly 1 million foreign student permits with the housing, jobs, and healthcare system didn't have the capacity to absorb. And Lena Diab has done nothing to push him or the Prime Minister to put an end to this type of disorder. Earlier this year, the Auditor General found widespread, rampant fraud in the foreign student processing system. At that time, Conservatives called for the resignation of Ministers Fraser and Diab, who played significant roles, and this is a national scandal. It has to be looked at this way. Months have gone by, and the Prime Minister has allowed these two people to continue to destroy Canada's immigration consensus. How many crimes committed by non-citizens is okay for the Prime Minister? Is 18,000 enough? Is that what he considered to be under control? According to the Prime Minister, how many non-citizens convicted of serious crime should be allowed to stay in Canada? All of them? There must be consequences for this type of scandalous failure because of the consequences that it has on Canada's social fabric. The Prime Minister must fire the Justice Minister and the Immigration Minister and replace them with people who are willing to set the course straight. Canada's Conservatives continue to stand ready to work collaboratively to get policies passed with anyone who's willing to admit that these are problems and to fix Canada's profoundly broken immigration system. Thank you.
Thank you. Merci. We'll now go to the question period. Please stick to the one question, one follow-up rule. We'll start with David Baxter, Canadian Press. Oh, excuse me, David.
There we go. Let's wear a couple hats. So it's got to turn the get the camera all set up for this part. Yes, going back to just talking about how the conversation needs to be bigger than just the numbers. Like everything we've seen, by and large, from the immigration department over the last little while is primarily levels based, focused on that side. Yeah. Why do you think that is?
It's a great question, and thank you for wearing many hats today, David.
Yeah, it's CP. We wear many hats every day.
Look, the reason why I wanted to highlight the global story from last week and the continued incidence of non-citizens who've been convicted of serious crime, like the case in Prince George, sexual assault, and then wasn't put on the National Sex Offender Registry out of concern that they would be deported, is because of the message that it sends to the broader Canadian public. First of all, it sends a message to non-citizens who want to come to Canada, like we're seeing with the story that was reported in Global about the Bishnoi gang, that we're open season here for that sort of stuff because there's limited consequences. But what I worry about, outside of the millions of Canadians whose lived experience is now like less safe streets, not just non-citizens. It's, we could talk about a more lenient justice system under the Liberals writ large, but for people who have immigrated to Canada, for newcomers who've come to Canada, they've built a life, they've played by the rules. We're getting to a point that if the Liberals aren't addressing these issues, you have more of a fragmentation because, there's a risk that all newcomers get painted with the same brush, and that can't be allowed to happen. It can't be. I think that there's a lot of concern about the health of Canada's pluralism. I have a lot of concerns about that. And I'm also concerned that it's story after story and it's not treated as a national tragedy, as a national scandal, that we're just like, oh, it's something else. It's again, we can't allow this to continue. So to your question about numbers, the numbers have been way too high. Too many people, too fast for housing, healthcare, and jobs to keep up. We know that there are, according to, I believe it was the CBC last year, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2 million people who are either on expired or about to expire visas within in 2026. The Globe reported about 500,000 non-documented people, I think, on top of that. So the numbers are too high. We know that. But immigration policy, setting immigration levels can't just be about the numbers themselves. It has to be about how does Canada have the capacity to integrate people into both the economy and our social fabric? And respect for rule of law is part of that. And that's why, I read the FAM decision over and over. There's nothing in it about the charter. It doesn't mention the charter once. In fact, it actually explicitly says that Parliament's will should not be circumvented. This should be a no-brainer. This should be one of those things that the Liberal government just steals right away, one-line code to the change to the criminal code to end this practice. And I think that would go a long way to addressing some of this social fragmentation that we're seeing.
Yeah, and just to follow up on a separate matter, we're about 2 months out now from the Alberta referendums. Yes. Do you anticipate seeing a broader cross-partisan effort to campaign for the Remain side, or the don't have a future referendum on? You know what I mean.
Yeah, it's been really great to be in the community this summer doing door knocking. Stampede was very well attended, thanks to all of you who maybe have had the opportunity to come out. And it was a topic of discussion for sure. I think where a lot of Albertans are at is that they're very proud Canadians. I actually think that Alberta's spirit of progress and drive and entrepreneurship and risk-taking, it's some of the best parts of Canadian culture writ large, and we take a lot of pride in being Canadian. So there is a lot of cross-partisan support for that sentiment. Albertans are some of the most proudest Canadians that I know. There's also a desire to ensure that some of the long-standing frustrations that the people in my province across political stripe have expressed are addressed and taken seriously by the federal government. And it's not just the federal government. It's, I raised this in the House of Commons. You had Yves-François Blanchet make this flippant comment that Alberta has no culture, right? Can you imagine if I said Quebec had no culture? I'd be rightly pilloried for that. I think that having a conversation that talks about how we have a stronger Alberta and united Canada is something that is happening across political stripe, something that I'm proud to be part of, and you can expect more things from me this summer on that front too.
We'll go to Rachel Ayalo, CTV.
Hi, nice to see you.
Likewise.
Thanks for taking our questions. So you've written quite thoughtfully this summer about the future of the Conservative Party. I'm wondering if you've got the impression from the leader's office, but also Party HQ, if they're listening.
Oh, yeah. First of all, when the House rises for the summer, there's always a danger that we have some more time on our hands, right? But it was a very positive thing. Look, I think it's very healthy for any political party to go through a period of introspection, especially on how we best serve our constituents in the roles that we're given. Right now, we're in the role of official opposition, and you ask about if they're listening. I mean, we've seen our leader, Pierre Poilievre. I was really encouraged this week. He was out talking about, and I think putting some very constructive, pinpointed pressure on the Prime Minister to get a fair trade deal for Canada from the United States, and to hold the Prime Minister specifically to account on his promise to get a better deal for Canadians. That's really constructive. That's something that I think our people across Canada elected us to do. And to me, when I talk about focus on, our party needs to focus on winning, because we want to enact change, like some of the changes I've talked about today in this press conference. It's that type of activity that says, okay, yeah, back in the saddle, let's go, giddy up, it's fun. So that's been very encouraging, and I come to Ottawa this week with a note of optimism, for sure.
So just to follow up on that, in that essay you wrote, quote, "For progress to be made, of movement owes grace to a leader who decides to, in turn, show humility and discipline after a setback." Do you think that Poilievre has adequately done that?
Well, I mean, if you guys ever find yourselves putting your name on a ballot and running in a campaign, it takes a lot out of you. And then, Mr. Poilievre did that twice in a year, not just at a constituency level, but he also went through a federal election. And I have a lot of respect for him for doing that, because of the discipline it takes to be on that long while being focused on constituents. So that was really important to me. And I also think that, taking a moment and being like, okay, this summer, where are we focusing? And reading reports from all of you, from listening to industry leaders and saying, like, we need a trade deal that works. We need you in there pushing the government to do better. That's one example of many that I could give you. So again, that to me is a cause for optimism. I've been doing this a hot minute now, and I've been through my peaks and valleys with the party. But what encourages me is that we have a team of people, particularly in our caucus, that want to serve the country and be unapologetic, fierce advocates for their constituents. And over the last week, especially since I wrote that piece, I've had a lot of folks reach out to me and be like, "Yeah, we're doing this, we're doing that, and I want to talk to you about this or that." And I feel invigorated and refreshed in terms of party unity heading into the fall.
Ryan Tumulty, Toronto Star.
On a similar vein, you've had 3 MPs resign from caucus over the course of the summer. That's on top of 4 MPs who crossed the floor over the last session. Do you think the caucus, and particularly, do you still have faith in the leader to be able to win the next election?
I mean, you could ask the same question to Mark Carney, right? I mean, he's had, 7 resign? I mean, would you ask him that question?
Many of those have resigned for ambassadorships and other...
You had Stephen Guilbeault that kind of went out in a bit of a blaze of glory, credit to him.
We wrote a lot about Stephen Guilbeault when he did that.
So the reason why I asked that is this. All right, you see people resigning and or crossing the floor. I think it's happened in every parliament I've been part of. What's important to me, as the member of parliament for Calgary-Nose Hill, is ensuring that my party, which I feel that we do, have a cohesive plan, particularly going into the fall session, on what we're focused on in terms of delivering results for our constituents. And now that we're getting closer, ever closer, inching closer to the resumption of Parliament in the fall, you're going to see more of this. You're going to see more of our leader out there, critics, and that's what we'll continue to be focused on.
And in Alberta right now, the Prime Minister signed this deal with Premier Smith to build a pipeline. He's moving that through the process for becoming a national project in the national interest. Has that changed the mood of Albertans at all? Do they have faith that this pipeline is going to be built?
It's a good question. There's not a lot of trust with this federal government among Albertans because of the last decade of federal policy, right? And the fact that the government, the Liberals, haven't signaled that they're going to get rid of some of the broader impediments to investment in the energy sector, like former Bill C-69, C-48, that also, you had one of the big CEOs come out and say, like, how are we supposed to attract capital under that environment? The other thing I'll say is this, like, there are other jurisdictions in the world who are building pipelines in 18 months. I think that when I talk to people behind closed doors across political stripe in the city and in the province, that there's a concern that this is just a process for a process. So really, the job for the Liberals at this point is to actually put shovels in the ground and to also remove some of those other barriers to investment. And in terms of what our job is as Conservatives, it's to hold them to account, point that out, and make it happen. Because just, an agreement to agree is not a shovel in the ground, and trust will come when there's actual construction.
We'll go to Tom Perry, CBC.
On that, just countries that are doing pipelines that quickly are generally, they're Middle Eastern countries. They're not democracies.
There's South American countries
yeah,
too.
that's the question. Do you think it's
Mexico.
realistic?
Well, Mexico is a democracy,
sure.
right?
Do you think it's realistic then? Do you think that Canada, given the jurisdictions, given Indigenous concerns, that we could do something that fast?
I have to believe in our country. Why can't we be the best in this? Right? Saying that, like it's that we can't have an attitude towards defeatism, right? Why can't we respect consultation? Why can't we attract capital? Why can't we do all of these things? If we want to be the best in the world, we have to think we're the best in the world, right? And the reality is like, just to mildly push back on the premise of your question, there are other democracies around the world who are getting the job done a lot quicker than we are. So it is my job and the job of the official opposition to demand better. Like we should do better, right? So I that's where my head is at, is if the status quo isn't cutting it, then maybe the status quo should be changed. And that is what I hope the Liberals will do and what I will be pushing them to do with my colleagues this fall.
And just on the trade deal, from your perspective, or negotiations toward a trade deal, how difficult do you think it is for this government or any government to deal with the Trump administration?
Well, I think about some comments that our party leader, Pierre Poilievre, made, I think it was yesterday, talking about how entering into any trade negotiation with anybody who's in the Oval Office or any other country, Canada should be in the biggest position of strength that we can be, right? So, we were just talking about development of pipelines, critical minerals. He talked about how, you can have a positive leveraging position. I wish over the last decade that the federal government hadn't undertaken policy that took positive cards away from us on the table. But I would answer your question by directing it to Mr. Carney, okay? He put his hand up in the general election. Your outlet reported that he said that he could get a better deal for Canada. That is the standard that he set himself to. In subsequent meetings, he said, we're going to have a better deal in 30 days. That was a year ago. I would like that promise to be delivered on. So the person who needs to be held to account in the domestic context in Canada is Mark Carney. He needs to be held to account constructively, which is why we've been putting out constructive proposals, but he has to deliver on his promise to Canadians. That's why many Canadians lent him their vote, and so he better get her done. And we will continue to push him on that point.
Next up, Riddhi Kachela, Hill Times.
Thank you for taking our questions today. I wanted to ask you about this report by Toronto Star that recently said that the Alberta Separatist Party had out-of-province donors. I want to get your thoughts on, do you feel concerned that external factors or individuals are backing and funding the separatist groups?
Well, I don't know about that, right? I don't know about that, but I would say this. The federal Liberal government has dragged its feet on foreign interference for nearly a decade. And, they've just set up the office 3 or 4 years later. So do I support stronger measures to prevent foreign interference in Canada's electoral system across the board? Of course, but over to the federal Liberals on that.
Thank you. And on a different note, recently a group of Iranian men have been campaigning because their express entry process has been stalled, and they've received procedural fairness letters because of their past military service in Iran over what they say they didn't have choice. I wonder if you are aware of that issue, and do you believe that Canada should take a tougher stance on these express entry applications?
I make a practice of not commenting on particular cases unless I know all the details of a case. So I kind of loath to make a broad generality without knowing the details of a case writ large. It's irresponsible to do that. I would just say this. I think that the Liberal government has put the many Persian Canadians, many people who fled the murderous Iranian regime and who are now in Canada in a difficult situation because they've failed. We've seen high-profile cases where they've failed to screen and actually let senior officials of the Iranian regime into the country. So does the Liberal government need to do better on its overall screening process? Of course it does. And they need to be transparent about those measures with the community. And this is something that we have called over and over and over and over for the Liberals to do over the last year. And I frankly don't think they're taking it seriously.
Thank you. Then Gillian Pepper, Global News.
Hi, thank you for taking our questions today. I just wanted to ask you more directly, sort of following up on my colleague's question. I don't think I heard an answer to this question earlier, but do you believe you could win an election under Mr. Poilievre's leadership?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. You know, for the last, this is my fifth mandate, and you know, and what I can say is this. There are many things that Mark Carney has not delivered on. I mean, many of you are reporting on some of those this week. And it's not just, I don't say that just for political strategy. That has real impact on Canadian lives. Like, people can't afford to eat. We're talking about crime today. The implications of whether or not he can live up to his promise, Mr. Carney, during the election on getting a trade deal, those all have big-time implications for the average Canadian. And you have Mr. Poilievre out every day talking about those issues, every single day. Every day, trust me. I hear about it from him too. And that's a good thing. And, you know, one of the things that I'm very proud of that our entire team did in the last federal election that we've continued to do is to focus on those issues, on affordability, on crime, on trade, and relentless, like, we'll just keep prosecuting those issues and moving forward.
Thank you. And just as a follow-up on the trade side of things, do you believe that the provinces should put U.S. booze back on the shelves if we get some relief from U.S. tariffs?
Two things. I think that that's a conversation for the provinces, but I'll just refer you to the comments that our party leader said yesterday, which was Mr. Carney's put a lot of chips on the table. He's conceded a lot and hasn't gotten a lot in return. I think that needs to end.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. That puts an end to this press conference. Merci beaucoup à tous.